Hey guys, here we are at 18th part of the story. Where starts right after the Sasuke retrieval, Jiraiya takes Naruto on a 3-year training trip. Taking his training seriously, Naruto strives to become the best he can and learn everything that Konoha denied him. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe button. Now, let's jump right in. Morning in Karakura came as the sun rose over the horizon. With the first rays of light shining across the large coalition of islands, a number of people began to wake up, getting themselves ready to start another day. Bakers began baking their goods, merchants started to set up shop, and a number of shinobi could be seen traveling across the roofs of buildings. A light breeze blew through the hidden village, carrying with it the scent of the sea. It was this scent that caused Yugito to stir from her slumber. Cracking a single eye open, the young woman with long blonde hair quickly shut it again as several rays of light streaming in through the nearest window hit her eyes. Groaning, she rolled onto her side and shut her eyes again, determined to get a few more minutes of sleep before starting her day. It wasn't like she had anything pressing to do right now anyways. As she rolled over, her right hand came into contact with something that caused her to pause. It was soft, and round, and squishy. She recognized what it was, even in her semi-conscious state. Opening both eyes, the first thing Yugito saw was the mass of red hair. It was spread across the bed, looking almost like wildfire as the sunlight hit it. The second thing she saw was the woman that hair belonged to, a beautiful woman with a figure that rivaled her own, and a face that held a sensual elegance about it. Even when she was at rest, the woman looked positively alluring, with her eyes closed and her lips parted ever so slightly, just begging someone to plant a kiss on them. Yugito shook her head of such thoughts, but could not deny it had entered her mind. The last thing the blonde-haired Jinchuriki noticed was that her hand was on the woman's right breast. Yugito blinked several times, wondering what she should do. After a moment's thought, she decided to slowly take her hand off Mei's well-formed chest so as not to wake her. "You can leave it there if you want." Startled, Yugito tilted her head to see that Mei was already awake. The woman's sea-green eyes were staring at her with a mixture of amusement and mischief that reminded her a lot of the man they were going to marry. Maybe that was the reason she had allowed this woman to convince her to share a bed. "I didn't want to wake you," Yugito said, letting her hand come back down to rest on Mei's bare bosom. "I've been awake for a while," Mei admitted. The woman with gloriously long red hair allowed her own hand to rest on Yugito's. "I don't really feel like getting up right now though, so I decided to relax a bit." "I don't think that's really something a kage should say," Yugito teased. "People will accuse you of being lazy." It was interesting for Yugito to realize how at ease she was with the other woman. Maybe it was because they had shared a sexual encounter with each other during the prelims when they both had sex with Naruto. In fact, she was sure that was the reason. Still, it did not change how fascinating the thought of her and this woman being with each other than was necessary was to the blonde beauty. "They can say whatever they want," Mei countered. "I don't really care, though I doubt anyone would actually complain. With Mizuno-kuni at peace, I don't have as much to do anymore. Relatively speaking, at least, especially when compared to immediately after the war when they were rebuilding the nation." The process of not only rebuilding her shinobi forces after having them nearly cut in half, but also aiding the civilians regain their livelihood, and rebuilding Karakura from all the damage it had taken during the war had been a very long and arduous process. It was fortunate they had the full support of the daimyo in this, or the process would have taken much longer than 2 years. "That sounds like an excuse to me," Yugito mumbled. Despite saying this, the blonde-haired beauty scooted closer to Mei, allowing their equally nude bodies to conform as she used the redhead's bosom as a pillow. "It's only an excuse when there is actually work to do," Mei countered as she pulled the slightly younger woman closer. Cuddling with Yugito wasn't the same as cuddling with Naruto, but for the moment, both of them were willing to content themselves with each other. "I can afford to rest for a few more minutes." Yugito moaned slightly as she relaxed into the other woman's embrace. Her eyes closed again as warmth seeped into her body. She allowed herself this small moment of peace and quiet to last for several seconds before speaking again. "So what do we have to do today?" "There are only a few more formalities to worry about before we can finalize the alliance between Kumo and Kiri." "Great. It shouldn't take longer than an hour or two," Mei ignored the sarcasm in Yugito's voice. "The council is only procrastinating because that's how they work. They want this alliance to happen just as much as we do, since it will mean securing both our northern and eastern borders from intrusion. Once that happens, we'll officially be allies with both Konoha and Kumo." "And Suna," Yugito added. "And Suna," Mei agreed, though the desert nation was not really important to Kiri, being too far away for them to really affect her village. A thoughtful hum escaped her lips. Once the alliance is finalized, we'll become the largest coalition of allied shinobi villages in the elemental nations. Not to mention the most powerful. Yugito could not help but agree. An alliance between Konoha, Kiri, Kumo, and Suna would make them the largest and most powerful group of allied villages. That was 4 of the 5 great shinobi nations. That was a lot of firepower to bring down. We're going to ruffle some feathers when the alliance becomes official. May nearly snorted. We've already ruffled quite a few feathers. Some of the smaller countries have learned of the alliance and are getting restless. They won't do anything though. They know that if they were to start anything they would be crushed. The minor villages were much smaller than their counterparts in the 5 great nations. Plus their forces were not as well trained due to their lack of funding. A war against one nation of Kiri's size would be costly. A war against 4 was suicidal. Do we know what Iwa has to say about all this? No. Mei shook her head at Yugito's question. Iwa has been silent since several of their ninja went rogue and attempted to use Koyuki as a hostage to kill Naruto. They cannot afford to make any moves right now, though I do not doubt they know about the alliance. It wasn't like they had tried keeping it a secret. Every village worth their weight likely knew about the upcoming new battles between Naruto, Mei, and Yugito. It wasn't as publicized as Naruto's close friendship with Koyuki, but it wasn't like they had done anything to hide it either. Yugito did not say anything, merely absorbed the information to the best of her abilities. As a shinobi of Kumo, and one of its Jinchuriki at that, she had not really had to worry about the politics between the villages like this before. She wasn't like Mei, who had to worry about running a village, or Naruto, who was the head of 2 nearly extinct clans. She was just a ninja with a giant chakra entity sealed inside of her. As such, these political concepts were a little more difficult for her to grasp. It was while Yugito was trying to work her way through the knowledge her fellow sister wife had given her that Naruto appeared before them within a Hiraishin. Both Yugito's and Mei's eyes lit up when they saw the man they were to marry, but soon realized something was wrong when he did not smile at them. In fact, he looked rather grave. Koi, Mei spoke up, disentangling herself from Yugito to stand up, heedless of her own nudity. What's wrong? Naruto said nothing as he walked over to them. Yugito also made to stand. She was only given enough time to sit up, however, before her husband-to-be sat down on the bed and pulled her into a hug. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a mere whisper. "I am so sorry." Yugito did not know what was going on, but a feeling of dread began to well up inside of her, along with confusion. Why was he saying this? What was he sorry about? She pushed Naruto back a little so she could look at him. The pit in her stomach increased when she saw the despondency on his face. "Naruto, why are you sorry? What's wrong?" When Naruto bit his lip, Yugito knew that she would not like his answer. She had no idea how right she was. Zux. Breaking the news of Kumo's destruction to Yugito had been much harder than Naruto thought it would be. No amount of preparation could have prepared him for the anguish this knowledge would have given the woman he shared so much in common with. The look on her face when he told her, that tormented expression she had given him, was something that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Several hours had passed since then. Mei was off in a meeting with her council. As much as she would have liked to remain and help Naruto comfort her distraught sister wife, she couldn't neglect her duties as the Mizukage. She had left the man they both loved to comfort Yugito, holding her in his arms as she cried out her anguish and rage to the world. It was the only thing he could do in this situation, and it left him feeling powerless. What kind of fiancé was he that the only thing he could do was console his inconsolable significant other? He should have tried to kill pain when he had the chance. Had he done that, none of this would have happened. Yugito wouldn't be mourning the loss of her village, and he wouldn't have to deal with this feeling of helplessness and guilt. The Jinchuriki for the two-tailed Nekomata had fallen asleep several minutes ago, having expended all of her energy crying and screaming out her denial, shock, sorrow, and anger to the world. She was sitting sideways in Naruto's lap as he sat on the bed, his back against the headboard. His arms were wrapped around her in a tight embrace, as if he were trying to shield her from the world. Her head was tucked neatly in the crook of his neck as he rested his chin on the crown of her head. It was about midday now, which Naruto noted when he looked out the window and saw the sun shining high overhead, sending beams of light down on the world below. From his position on the bed, the blonde Uzumaki Namikaze was able to clearly make out the people of the village hidden in the mist as they went about their business, ignorant and unknowing of the tragedy that had just taken place. Naruto felt a dissonance between the world around him and his own broiling emotions. A day in which something so horrifically tragic happens should not be this bright and lively. The sound of the door clicking open took his attention off his desolate thoughts, something he was grateful for. Looking up as someone entered the room, Naruto was greeted with the sight of Mei Terumi walking over to him. "How is she?" was the first thing Mei asked as she sat down at the edge of the bed. Naruto's eyes traveled down to where he could see the shimmering blonde hair of Yugito. He could not see anything else right now, but he knew that if he were to get a glimpse of her face he would see red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. "I think the answer to that should be more than obvious," he said softly, shifting as he tightened his hold on the blonde woman in his arms. "Right, foolish question, I know." Mei scooted further onto the bed, moving to rest against the headboard right next to him. She grabbed Yugito's calves, lifting them up so she could scoot under them and then set them back down on her la. Her hands traveled up and down the other woman's legs, which caused the female Jinchuriki to purr lightly in her sleep. It was the only form of comfort the redhead could offer right now. "How did the council take this news?" asked Naruto after several minutes of silence. "About as well as can be expected," Mei said with a heavy sigh. "They're afraid. It seems that news of Kumo's destruction has reached all corners of the elemental nations, as well as the knowledge that one of the 5 great hidden villages was wiped out by a single person. It's only natural they would be afraid of someone with that kind of power." "Yeah. Is something wrong, Koi?" Naruto shook his head. "Not really, it's just..." The blonde-haired Uzumaki grimaced. "I can't help but feel like this is my fault. If I had just killed Pain when I had the chance. If I hadn't run when I confronted him in Ame, then none of this would have happened. Yugito wouldn't be distraught and Kumo would still be standing." "But your sensei would have been dead," Mei pointed out. "I love Jiraiya like a father, but the life of one man isn't worth that of the thousands who are likely dead now thanks to Pain." It was a harsh thing to say, callous almost, especially coming from Naruto. But as shinobi, both he and Mei knew that sacrifices were sometimes necessary no matter how much they hated that aspect of their lives. How many people lost fathers, mothers, sons and daughters in that attack? Is my happiness worth the happiness of all those who lost loved ones of their own? He looked back down at Yugito. Is it worth her happiness? Mei did not answer his question. They both knew the answer, and she knew that, regardless of what she told him, Naruto would blame himself. She tried another approach. "Do you think you could have beaten him?" "I don't know." Naruto bit his lip. "Maybe. Pain was able to beat Jiraiya-sensei. My strength is comparable, but we never went all out in our spars, so there's no telling who is the stronger between the two of us. Still, Pain was injured from his battle. I saw that at least one of his paths had been destroyed. I also know how his paths work, I know their weaknesses, their strengths. All he likely knows about me is my affinity for wind jutsu, my use of the Hiraishin and that I can summon toads. I had all the advantages and yet I still retreated." "Oh Naruto." Mei's eyes softened as she looked at the man she was to wed. He looked so despondent right now. That damn noble streak of his was acting up again, making him blame himself for Kumo's destruction even though there was no way he could have known this would happen. Unable to do anything else, Mei let her head rest on his shoulder and pulled herself as close to him as possible. Right now this was the only thing she could do. Zux. Naruto was jolted awake as the blonde-haired beauty in his arms stirred. Looking down he watched as Yugito sniffled a bit. He could not see her face, but he imagined she didn't look too pleasant right now. "Yugito." Her head lifting a bit, Yugito looked up at Naruto, who winced. When he pictured how horrible she would look he had really been underestimating just how bad it was. Yugito's eyes were bloodshot and puffy from her tears. Her cheeks had tear tracks staining them. There was even a little fluid running down her nose. "Naruto." Yugito's voice cracked as she spoke, as if she had not used it for a long time. "How are you feeling?" "Awful." Yugito buried her face in his chest. Her arms wove tightly around his torso, holding onto him like some kind of lifeline as her entire body went into a fit of shuddering. In return Naruto's arms held her tightly, trying to give her as much comfort as he could with the gesture. The pair were silent for a moment, a long moment that seemed to stretch on without end. But end it did when Yugito spoke again. "I'm not dreaming, am I?" she asked, her voice soft, conveying with it an anguish and sadness that Naruto felt did not belong in her voice. "This is really happening. Kumo was destroyed. I'm sorry." Naruto knew his words meant nothing, but he couldn't help but apologize. It was his fault Kumo was destroyed. Had he just killed Pain when he had the chance this wouldn't have happened. "I can't believe it's gone," Yugito mumbled. "Kumo was my home, I grew up there my whole life and the shinobi I worked with were always so kind to me, treating me like somebody important instead of scorn like most Jinchuriki are treated in their own village. A stifled sob escaped her lips. Naruto could feel several tears dampen his shirt. They didn't deserve to die. No, they didn't, Naruto agreed. I wish I could say something that would help ease your pain, but I've never had this happen to me before. I've never lost so much in such a short amount of time. I can't even begin to imagine how you must feel right now. I'm sorry. I wish I could do something for you. Just hold me, Yugito told him, just like this. Hold me and tell me you'll always be with me, promise me you won't leave me. Naruto felt like someone had stabbed him in the heart. The woman who had always been so strong, both in spirit and body, was gone. The woman he had grown to love so much sounded more like a weak little girl than a strong-spirited kunoichi. It was enough to break Naruto's heart. I promise, he said, even though he knew this was one of the few promises he should not make. There was no guarantee he could keep it. But he also knew how fragile Yugito's state currently was. The mere fact that she was even asking him to make this promise when she knew as well as he that the life of a shinobi was oftentimes short and violent told him this. She needed some reassurance, even if it ended up being false assurances. Right now she needed something to hold on to. So he wrapped his arms tightly around his fellow Jinchuriki and gave her the words she wanted, no, the words she needed to hear. I promise, I'll never leave you. I'll stay with you forever and a day. And you know how I am with promises. If I make a promise, you'll never break it, because that's your nindo. Yugito and Naruto were almost startled when another voice spoke up. But they relaxed when a second set of arms wrapped around them both, holding onto them just as tightly as they held each other. I also promise to stay with you, Yugito, Mei promised the other woman, kissing the blonde on the temple. Yugito allowed her body to relax into the combined embrace of Mei and Naruto, her eyes closing and her body slowly beginning to shut down once more. She was still tired, oh so tired. She needed more rest. Thank you, she whispered softly before falling asleep within the embrace of the two people who meant the world to her. Zox. The day after Yugito and Mei received the news of Kumo's destruction, the trio found themselves standing outside of Kirigakure's gates, waiting. They had received a message sometime last night from Tsunade that a response and rescue team made up of Suna and Konoha Shinobi, and Haru no Kuni Samurai would be coming to pick them up before setting out for Kumagakure. They would be arriving sometime that morning. And so they stood there, silently waiting as the sun rose over the horizon and painted both the sky and ocean with brilliant splashes of color. It was a positively cheerful day, a stark contrast to the trio of ninja who waited with the Kirigakure squadron that would be joining them on this expedition. One of Naruto's arm was wrapped around Yugito's waist. He had not let go of the woman since the news had been released. Even when they ate, the pair stayed in constant physical contact, with his fellow blonde sitting on his lap. Yugito did not seem to be in any rush to have this end. Even though she knew it was a crutch to rely on Naruto for strength, right now she needed his strength because she did not have any of her own at the moment. Especially with what they were going to be doing, where they would be going. The young woman knew she would need all the strength she could get if she wanted to see what remained of Kumo with her own eyes. The group did not have to wait long. A mere 30 minutes after they arrived at the gates with the small contingent of Kiri Shinobi that were to be accompanying them did a deep thrumming sound from above them, growing louder with each passing moment. As one the group looked up to see a speck appear in the distance. It was too far for most shinobi to see, but came closer with each passing second. One speck soon became two as the objects continued sailing through the air. The unidentified flying objects eventually became large enough that everyone could make them out in more detail. They were large, oblong objects with complex multi-plane fins. The way they glistened in the light let everyone know they were made from some kind of alloy. The skeletal structure seemed to consist of several rings and longitudinal girders. The two flying objects were being propelled from the back by several engines, mounted in gondolas, or engine cars, which were built into the structural skeleton. A comparatively small compartment was built into the bottom of the large, cylindrical objects with tapered ends. No doubt it was where all of the passengers were located. So that's Haru no Kuni's new Zeppelins, Mei said, intrigued and awed by the massive flying ships. Even Yugito had snapped out of her current depression to gape at the large vessels as they set down a couple meters away. I had heard they were impressive to see, but I didn't expect them to be so massive. Haru no Kuni has always been well known for their advanced technology, Naruto said as he and the others began walking towards the Zeppelins. The doors on the massive metal monstrosities opened up and a boarding ramp was soon lowered. This is their latest invention. I'm told it was based off the smaller blimps that Dota created several years back. As the group neared the Zeppelins, 2 squads of shinobi from Konoha and Suna emerged from the massive floating ships. Naruto smiled when he saw who was there to greet them. Shikamaru, Sakura, Ino, Kuji. He greeted the 4 who gave their own greetings in turn. Troublesome. This is so troublesome. Shikamaru grunted as Ino elbowed him. Anyways, we're not the only squads here, but we're in charge of this mission. He rubbed his torso. We've got several more squads and 1 squad of Anbu from both Konoha and Suna. Naruto nodded, then looked at the Suna contingent. Temari, Kankuro, I didn't expect Gaara to send you too. Gaara actually wanted to come himself, but we convinced him otherwise. Temari looked at the group, her eyes surveying both Mei and Yugito for a second before moving back to Naruto. It took us a lot of effort to keep him from leaving. It's probably a good thing that you did, Naruto frowned. With what's happened, Suna is probably the safest place for him right now. Yeah, because Kuma didn't just get turned into a smoking crater by one guy, oof. Kankuro, Temari hissed at her younger brother as she retracted her elbow from his torso. The hell was that for, sis? Asked Kankuro as he rubbed his now sore ribs. Temari just glared at him before pointing at the 3 people in front of them. When he turned his head, it was to the side of Naruto and Mei glaring daggers at him while Yugito had buried her face in the blonde Uzumaki's shoulder. Ha ha, ha. Kankuro laughed nervously, trying not to shrink in on himself at the sight of 2 cage-level ninja shooting him looks that could melt steel. Considering one of them actually could melt steel and the other was rumored to be one of the most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations, his attempts failed epically. In other words, Kankuro looked about ready to shit himself. I'm really sorry about that, that was totally callous of me. It won't happen again. The puppet user gulped nervously when he saw Naruto's lips thin into a tight, white line. Kankuro got the distinct feeling that the only reason the young clan heir had not pummeled him was because of the blonde chick he was currently holding in his arms. Even that may not have been enough to save him, but help came to him however inadvertently from a very unexpected source. Naruto-kun. Descending from the ramp of the second blimp was none other than Koyuki Kazuyana, the daimyo to Yuki no Kuni and another. One of Naruto's wives. As was per usual when she was out in public, Koyuki was decked out in very regal garb, a thick blue kimono with light red accents and voluminous sleeves. Her hair had been styled in a pair of loops that swung behind her as she ran towards them. The young woman, in her haste, seemed to have foregone any sense of decorum and had broken rank from the samurai surrounding her in order to full-on sprint towards Naruto and the group. Yuki, Naruto greeted with a smile. Koyuki looked like she wanted to jump on him as she stopped in front of them, but withheld herself when she saw Yugito in his arms. How have you been? It's been a while since we saw each other. About a month all told. Naruto had been so busy recently that he'd been unable to visit her weekly like he would have preferred. Busy, Koyuki said, there's a lot of work involved in running a country, you know? He did know. She complained about it to him often enough. I'm surprised you're here then. I may have used this as an excuse to take a small break, Koyuki admitted shamelessly as her contingent of samurai caught up to her. But I thought you guys could use my help. She looked at Yugito, her eyes dimming a bit before they flickered back to Naruto. I wanted to lend whatever aid I could. We could use a hand, actually, Naruto said, thank you. Koyuki smiled at him, but was interrupted from saying anything when the captain of the samurai contingent with her spoke up. Koyuki Dono, while we are among allies here, I would like to request that you not run off like that again. Rolling her eyes, Koyuki said, oh relax, Aizen. No one would dare attack me here, not with 3 cage-level ninja, 2 squads of shinobi and a contingent of Haru no Kuni samurai. It would be suicide. Nevertheless, I would like to ask that you show a bit more caution, the man replied smoothly, his voice both articulate and concerned. It would not do for rumors to spread around about you. This time, Koyuki scowled. I do not care about rumors, you know that, and it's already a well-established fact that Naruto is one of my closest friends. If people want to talk about us, then let them. You would also do well to remember your station. You may be one of the best captains of my guard, but I will not put up with you disrespecting me like that. As Koyuki argued with the head of her guard, Naruto found himself studying the older male. He was a very scholarly-looking man, with square-rimmed glasses, and brown eyes and hair. This did not fool Naruto though, who knew the man was very capable. He wouldn't be wearing the white haori of a guard captain over the chakra armor that all members of the Haru no Kuni guard wear if he wasn't. Aizen Sasuke was one of the newer members of Koyuki's guard detail. He had risen through the ranks from a lowly soldier relatively quickly after joining. Naruto knew this was because he had trained in Tetsuno Kuni, the land where powerful samurai are in abundance. While he had never seen the man in action, it was said that Aizen had mastered the art of Iaido and channeling chakra through his swords to enhance their power at a very young age. I don't think he's disrespecting you, Yuki-chan. Naruto placed his free hand on her shoulder. He's merely concerned about your well-being. Thank you, Naruto-san. Oh fine, Koyuki rolled her eyes. I'll be more careful and not run off anymore. There, you happy now? Very. This is so troublesome, Shikamaru murmured again as he scratched the back of his head, his eyes blinking lazily. Look, I don't want to interrupt you guys, he paused. Actually I do. This situation is troublesome enough without all this quarreling. Anyway, we really should get a move on. Don't be rude, Shikamaru. Ino jabbed her friend and Chunin commander in the gut with her elbow. Shikamaru grunted and rubbed his now sore stomach, but didn't react to the blonde girl's maneuver otherwise. He is right though, Sakura said, we really do need to get moving. The more time we spend here the more likely it is that we'll be unable to find anyone to save. At the reminder that they were going to Kumo in order to rescue any survivors, Yugito perked up. They're right, she said softly, stepping away from Naruto's comforting embrace to stand on her own. We really do need to leave. Yugito. Naruto stared at the woman's eyes as they quivered. Are you going to be alright? Yes, She bit her lip. I need to go there, to see what happened to it. My home. I understand, Koyuki clapped her hands together, and in that case, we should get a move on. Yugito, you'll be coming in my Zeppelin. With that she grabbed the blonde girl by the arm and began gently guiding her to the Zeppelin she came out of. As they began walking off, Koyuki turned to look at Naruto. I'll leave you to commune with your friends and come up with a plan of action for this rescue operation. Yugito and I have some girl things to talk about? Girl things? Naruto blinked. What kind of, you know what? Never mind. I don't want to know. He waved them off. Have fun. Don't worry, we will. Zux. Yugito allowed Koyuki to guide her along as they walked down the halls of the Zeppelin. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walkways were made of metal and their footsteps created a series of loud clangs on the floor. Like the floors, the walls were also metal, and their polished surface gleamed brightly from the overhead lights. The glare they reflected caused Yugito to wince as it hit her overly sensitive eyes. The group soon arrived at a set of double doors at the end of the hall. They looked much more majestic than the rest of the hall, dark red wood polished to a shine with golden inlays and rose patterns running along the edges. It and the crest of the Kazuyana family on each door presented an ornate appearance that managed to keep from looking overly ostentatious. This is my personal flagship, Koyuki told Yugito when she saw the older woman staring at her door. Whenever I travel by air I use this Zeppelin. I see. Let's go. As two of the samurai and Koyuki's escort detail opened the door, the woman in question led Yugito into the room. The inside was just as beautiful as the door, though it was a bit more austere than the blonde Jinchuriki had expected. Aside from the plush, royal purple carpet and wooden panels along the wall, the only other decor inside was the large bed, a desk, a dresser, a changing area blocked off by screens, and a mirror with ornately woven framework. Why don't you sit on the bed while I get changed into something a little more comfortable? Koyuki asked Yugito as she walked towards the dresser where she began pulling out several articles of clothing. Of course, saying that she asked Yugito was a bit of an euphemism. When a daimyo asks you anything, it is more like an order most of the time, even if you were in with the daimyo doing to asking. Thus, Yugito sat down on the bed. Why did you want me to come with you? Asked Yugito as Koyuki moved behind the changing screens and began getting dressed in a new set of clothes. We're both going to marry Naruto, but we hardly get to see each other, Koyuki said as if it was the reason was obvious. Seconds later the daimyo to Haru no Kuni emerged wearing a pair of light blue flannel pants and a long-sleeve shirt. I thought this would be a good time to get to know you a bit better. Plus. Koyuki walked over to the bed and sat down right next to the other woman. Yugito watched her move. It was true she did not know the woman before her very well. They had only met a few times because Naruto's real relationship with Koyuki was still a closely guarded secret. Only her most loyal advisors and sister wives knew they were more than just close friends. It was this lack of knowledge about the woman before her that would probably best explain why she was so surprised when Koyuki pulled her into a hug. I also wanted you to know that I understand how you feel, Koyuki said to the stunned Yugito, who merely blinked as she found her head resting against the other woman's bosom. I remember when my uncle usurped my father's throne, killing him and forcing me to flee everything I ever knew. While my country was still there, I could never go back to it because I knew he would kill me if I did. I remember how hard it was knowing that I would never be able to see my father again, never visit my country again. It was so difficult that there were times I just wanted to give up. Koyuki paused, gathering her thoughts. Naruto, try as he might, can't understand what it's like to lose everything you've ever loved. A hand came up and gently brushed through Yugito's hair. But I do, and I know that sometimes you need a shoulder to cry at, a person who can understand what you're going through to truly help. I'm sure you already feel like you've cried enough tears, but if you think you've got any more left, now is probably the best time to get them out. It started with a stifled sob, then turned into a trickle of tears, before becoming a torrential downpour. As she was held in the arms of one of her fellow sister wives, Yugito cried tears of anguish and pain. Zux. Pain watched as the Geto Mazo greedily sucked out the Hachibi's chakra from its host. The chakra of the Baijiu had engulfed its host, who was still unconscious, and a long tendril had snaked its way to the mouth of the Geto. As the earthen-colored, decayed-looking statue with spiky protrusions on its back continued its task, one of the 9 eyes on its head began to slowly open. When the eye had opened fully, the task was finished, and Killer Bee was dropped unceremoniously to the ground where he lay still. Man. A sigh came from Kisame. That was a lot harder than it used to be. With only 4 of us left, it took more than twice the time it usually did. The silhouetted figure of the most notorious criminal in Karagakure looked at the now empty hands where the other members used to stand during this procedure. Deidara and Sasori, the zombie brothers, Itachi and now Kanon. Maybe we should think about getting new members. Ooh. Oh. New members sounds good. Right now there are no ninja who meet the qualifications we are looking for in members of Akatsuki, Pain said without hesitation. None of the current ninja save the Kages can possibly stand up to a Baijuo. That's too bad. Toby wanted to make more friends. Pain frowned at Madara, but didn't say anything about his stupid acting. There were more important matters that they needed to attend to. While it's a little early, I believe the time has come for us to declare war on the elemental nations. War, eh? Kisame gave a fanged grin. And how are we gonna do that? We don't have all the Baiju'u yet, and with only 4 members I don't see how we're going to be able to do much. Zetsu, Pain turned to the plant-like being with a wide and dark half. I want you to get in touch with the smaller nations' hidden villages. Get them to agree to meet me. Tell them the time has come for the smaller nations to rise up against the 5 great villages. If they are not convinced, inform them that I was the one who destroyed Kumo. Of course, Leader Sama, Zetsu's white half said. Don't worry, we'll get it done, the black half added. So we're gonna be using the smaller nations to fight? Kisame rubbed his chin. It's not a bad idea, but we're still outnumbered 20-1. It will be fine, Pain said, none of those arrayed against us can oppose the will of God. Zux. The sight that greeted them as their zeppelins reached Kumo was one that none of them could expect. It was a horrendous sight. The rocky spires of the mountain range that Kumagakure no Sato had been built upon were gone, the entire mountain range having collapsed. The once great village was now nothing more than a pile of rubble and debris. Naruto grit his teeth at the destruction done. Had anyone survived that? Could anyone survive the decimation of an entire mountain range? Once more the weight of his failures struck him with guilt. It's not a very pretty sight, is it? A soft voice asked in his ear. Naruto turned his head to see Yugao, decked out in her Anbu uniform, staring down at the village through the glass window. She had her mask on, so he could not see her face, but he could imagine the expression she was wearing. It was likely a mirror image of his own. It's a lot worse than I thought it would be, Naruto grimaced as he thought about the man who had done this. That kind of power is unfathomable for anything except a Baijuo. I had heard that Madara and Hashirama were able to cause this level of devastation whenever they fought, but for someone to be capable of leveling an entire mountain range in this day and age is unbelievable. Such is the power of one who wields the Rinnegan, even if it is a mock imitation of the one the Rikadu Sennin had. So this is the power of the Rinnegan? I hadn't realized it was so godlike? Do not be fooled, this level of destruction is not that of the gods. I could do this easily with an Amari, but it's definitely something within the Rinnegan's capabilities. The Rikadu Sennin's Rinnegan was so powerful he was able to create the moon you see floating overhead every night. That is the power of a true god. Naruto said nothing to Kyuubi's praise of the Rikadu Sennin's powers. If there was one thing he had learned about the nine-tailed entity sealed inside of him, it was that the only human he seemed to hold any respect for was the man who had been hailed. as the creator of ninjutsu, though the whisker-marked young man had no idea why. "Are the teams ready?" he asked out loud. "Yes," Yugao answered smartly. "They're all ready and awaiting your orders." "Good." Naruto turned from the side of the destroyed mountain range. He didn't want to see it anymore, not when he would be getting an up-close glimpse of it soon enough. "Then let's go." "Hi, Zux." Hoshigaki Kisame stopped walking as the sun overhead began to set. Glancing around, all he could see were trees, their trunks so thick and the interweaving branches creating an overlapping network so complex and intermingled that he could not see anything past them. His senses told him there was no one else around for miles, no enemies at least, and while he was not a very good sensor, he had come to trust his instincts. "So what do you think about all that?" Kisame asked of no one in particular. "Pain declaring war on the 5 great nations?" "Foolish," a voice spoke up from behind him. There was a rustling of bushes and leaves as Kisame turned around to see the man known as Toby walk out from behind a tree. "But it serves our purpose well enough. With everyone's eyes on Pain, it'll allow us to claim the remaining Baijuo. The Nanabi, the Nibi, and of course, that Namikaze Gaki," Kisame grinned. "Fighting that brat's going to be a blast." As if he were already anticipating a good fight, Kisame reached for the handle of Shimada and gripped it tightly. "We're not going after the Nibi or the Kyubi just yet," Toby informed him. "Now that Kumo has been destroyed, going after them is going to be difficult. I doubt they'll be separated anytime soon, and taking on the Nibi with Namikaze there will be nearly impossible. At my current level, I'm not sure I could beat him." "He must really be something if you're admitting that," Kisame observed. "He is his father's son." Several birds chirped as they flew through the trees. Kisame placed a hand against his shoulder, cracking his neck several times. "So what is it you want me to do?" "Pain is going to be busy preparing for war," Toby began. "He won't have time to watch your movements, and with Konan turning traitor he's lost his second set of eyes. You'll be able to move around much more freely from now on." "Good to know, but what do you want me to do?" "I've just received a report that the Kyubi has left Konoha for Kumo and taken many of Konoha's ninja in the hopes of finding survivors from Pain's attack. At least 6 squads containing some of Konoha's best and brightest are now gone, including the Kyubi Jinchuriki. I want you to head to Konoha and capture the Nanabi. She's living in the Namikaze estate, but spends most of her time within the Aburame clan grounds." "So I'm capturing another Jinchuriki, eh?" Kisame grinned a shark-like grin. "And on my own this time too. Sounds fun." "Be sure not to cause too much of a commotion," Toby added. "We cannot afford to lose another member. Zetsu will be helping you on this mission. He shall create a distraction for you." "Zetsu, huh? So we're doing that, then?" "Yes. It's a little earlier than I wanted, but circumstances have dictated that we unleash Zetsu sooner than I had anticipated." Kisame nodded. He was curious to know what Toby needed to do in Konoha, but honestly didn't care enough to ask. It wasn't like he would receive an answer anyways. Zux. Within the Hokage's office, one goddamn Hokage sat behind her desk, working on a large stack of papers. There were currently 2 different stacks, one of the unsigned petitions and reports she had yet to look over, and another for those papers she had already finished. The stack containing unfinished paperwork was the larger of the 2. The day had hardly even started and yet Tsunade was already stressing out, though on this day it had very little to do with the fact that she had more paperwork than she usual. Indeed, it had nothing to do with the paperwork at all. She had just received a report that the airships containing Naruto, Yugito and the joint Konoha-Kiri-Sunaharu forces had set down near Kumo and would begin looking for survivors. While that was all well and good, the report had also included a very detailed description of what happened to Kumo. An entire village gone. No. Not just gone. Turned into nothing more than a large crater in the ground. Even the mountains the once proud village had been situated in were no more. Tsunade shuddered at the thought of someone who had that kind of power at their disposal. What kind of inhuman being had the power to destroy an entire village on their own? "Tsunade-sama." Blinking, Tsunade looked up to see Konan standing in front of her desk. With Naruto off on a mission, his lover had decided to lend herself as Tsunade's aide, something the busty Hokage was thankful for as Shizune was needed at the hospital. The beautiful Kunoichi with blue hair and amber eyes had a scroll in her hand, which she handed off to the busty Hokage. "Another report?" she asked, opening the scroll and reading its contents. A frown crossed her face. "This is a report from one of our guard stations on the eastern border." She looked up at Konan. "I'm not sure why you felt this was important enough to give to me. It may be nothing, But that report came in 2 hours later than it should have, Konan told her. Naruto informed me that all guard stations are to send reports via carrier bird every 6 hours. I'm going to have to speak with Naruto about revealing Konoha protocol to someone who isn't a Konoha ninja, Tsunade sighed. She then straightened in her chair and looked at Konan. I doubt this is anything to worry about. The team is probably just experiencing some difficulties and couldn't get a message out sooner. Our eastern border tends to have the most trouble because it's so close to Iwa and there are a lot more bandits and highwaymen in the area due to the tension between our two nations. Konan nodded, but didn't look convinced. She couldn't place her finger on it, but she did not think the delay was due to difficulties with bandits or anything of the sort. Still, I'll have a team sent to check in on them, Tsunade added after a moment's thought. In times such as these it certainly couldn't hurt to be cautious. Konan nodded, mildly reassured. With nothing serious left to talk about, Tsunade leaned forward and smiled amicably at the younger woman. So how are you liking Konoha? It's exactly as Jiraiya-sensei said it was, Konan told the older Kunoichi. Your village is very beautiful, to be honest, I'm rather jealous. I wish Amigakura was as peaceful and beautiful as this village. You may end up getting your wish soon, you know? Tsunade told the woman. Naruto is doing everything he can to unite the shinobi nations through friendship and acts of goodwill. I know, Konan smiled at the mention of the man she had pledged herself to. His plans on uniting the elemental nations are much different than Pain's. It's why I decided to follow him. Zux. Several dozen miles from Konoha, hidden within a small hill and surrounded by shrubbery was a small outpost. It was one of many that littered Hinokuni. There were literally dozens of them, all interspersed throughout the nation. These outposts were built sometime after the Second Shinobi War on orders of the Sandaime Hokage, and all of them were dedicated towards keeping an eye on potential hostilities entering their nation. Ak. One of the Konoha shinobi, a chunin judging by the flak jacket, located at this particular outpost let out a grunt of pain as he was impaled by a hand. Crimson, life-giving liquid began pouring out of the wound, trickling onto the pale white hand that had been shoved right through his chest, flak jacket and all. The Konoha shinobi grit his teeth, blood leaking from his mouth as his arms shakily moved so he could grab onto the arm that had stabbed him. 1 second passed. Then 2. The Konoha ninja's arms went slack, dropping limply to his sides. The man was no more. As the dead Konoha shinobi slumped over the arm, Zetsu finished absorbing what chakra the man had left. When he was finished he tossed the now useless corpse away, letting it hit the ground several feet from him with a dull thud. While Zetsu was looking at the now dead ninja, Kisame walked up to him, his giant blade hefted over his shoulder like always. That was boring, the shark-like man grumbled as he stopped a few feet from the plant man. He looked at Zetsu. I hope that Jinchuriki gives me a better fight than these whims. Seriously, he had just taken on a full squad of Chunin and Jounin and they hadn't even been able to scratch him. Talk about a disappointment. Considering it's a Jinchuriki you're going to face, I bet she'll be much stronger than these ninja, Zetsu said. So you're going to be my distraction, huh? Kisame grunted. Where are the others? Oh, they're around. As Zetsu spoke, several figures emerged from the tree line. They were all Zetsu. To be more specific, they were clones of the original Zetsu. Unlike the original, these Zetsu's bodies were completely white and they had no Venus flytrap extension around their head. Also unlike the original, these Zetsus had a strange zigzag pattern running down their stomach and another one on each leg that were reminiscent of the flytrap extension. More clones soon came out of the woodworks, some emerging from the trees, others coming up from the ground. There were hundreds of them, maybe even thousands. More than enough to keep Konoha's shinobi forces occupied. Of the Zetsu there, 8 walked over to the original and placed a hand on his shoulder. A bright, blue glow engulfed them as chakra was transferred from the original to the clones. When the transfer was finished, the 8 clones no longer looked like Zetsu but one of the 8 shinobi that had been located at this outpost and killed. The newly transformed Zetsus moved off, 4 going into the outpost while the other 4 took to the trees and headed for Konoha. Let's go, Zetsu said as he began walking in the direction of Konoha as well. Finally, Kisame muttered as he began moving again. I was starting to get bored standing around like this. As he walked forward, the Zetsu clones began dispersing one by one, some disappearing into the trees and others melding into the ground. Soon the grounds around the outpost looked just as they always did, with no sign of what happened other than a few blood splatters on the grass. Konoha wouldn't know what hit them. The first sign anyone had that something was wrong was when several construction workers working on the edge of town went missing. They were supposed to have come back several hours ago, Yet none of them had returned from the forest. A group of Chunin had been dispatched. The Chunin had returned with the workers in tow and everything went back to normal. No one had thought much of the incident. Then other people started disappearing. The first person to disappear was a shop worker. Her manager asked her to fetch something from the storage. She'd gone to do as asked but never returned. Several hours later, the manager had gone back to search for her, only to discover no trace of the woman. It was as if she had vanished from thin air. This was not a singular incident. Several people across Konoha vanished around the same time, one after the other. There was no sign of anything having happened to them, no clues that could lead anyone to determining where they disappeared to. In order to keep the rising panic from spreading, the Hokage dispatched Shinobi to each scene. That was when the trouble truly started. Zox. Iruka had always been an average ninja. He'd never aspired to become a jonin. Thanks to the stains on his past, he believed that he could better serve Konoha by teaching future generations of troublemakers like Naruto Uzumaki and Konohamaru Sarutobi. What's more, the pride that he felt at seeing Shinobi that he'd personally taught reach heights most ninja never achieved was indescribable. Despite not being a jonin, or even a special jonin, Iruka did possess an innate danger sense. Even before the disappearances started occurring, he could tell that something was wrong. School was off that day, and so Iruka was working in the missions department, where he handed off lower-grade missions to jonin with Jinan squads. He was actually the first shinobi to have discovered the missing persons problem when several concerned citizens came in claiming that so-and-so individual was missing. Iruka-sensei, a voice called out, causing Iruka to look up. "Ah, hello, Sakura," Iruka said to the bubblegum-haired girl as she walked into the room. "Did you need something?" "I was just checking in to see if there's been any progress with the missing persons cases," Sakura said. "The hospital has been placed on high alert since we don't know what's going on and want to be ready. Have you heard anything new?" "None, I'm afraid. We trouble." The doors to the mission room burst open and a young teenager stumbled in. He was holding a hand to his torso. Blood stained his fingers and expanded across his shirt. His heavy breathing and the sweat covering his pale skin showed how much effort he'd put into coming here. He looked ready to pass out. "Udon," Iruka said in shock. "Are you alright?" Udon nodded, though it looked like the action took a lot of effort. Sakura came over and helped him stand, slinging one of his arms around her shoulder, while putting her own arm around his torso. "I'm okay, but you have to help Konohamaru. He's being attacked by an unknown group of ninja." "What?" Iruka and Sakura shouted at the same time. Konoha was one of the most secure hidden villages. This was due to the barrier, which alerted them to any foreign chakra signatures that were not registered into the seal that controlled it. The system had been created and upgraded by Naruto Namikaze, and it had already alerted them to numerous spies trying to enter Konoha unnoticed. For someone to sneak through the barrier. "Sakura, take Udon to the hospital," Iruka ordered as he stood from his seat. "I'm going to alert the Hokage to what's happening." "Right." Iruka was pleased when Sakura didn't argue with him. After checking to make sure that he had all of his equipment, Iruka rushed out of the room and headed for the Hokage tower. "I need to hurry." Zox Sakura was concerned. Udon was bleeding a lot more than a normal person should have. While she couldn't see the wound as she helped carry him, she could feel the blood soaking into her shirt. That meant that whatever had injured Udon must have cut one of his veins. Unfortunately, because of the delicate nature when it came to healing internal injuries like a severed vein, she couldn't perform more than basic first aid until they reached the hospital. "Hold on for just a little while longer, Udon," Sakura said. Udon nodded, though he could have also just been slipping in and out of consciousness. His head bobbed up and down as she half-carried him into the hospital. As the doors closed behind her, she ignored the patients standing around and rushed further into the building. "I need a stretcher," Sakura ordered the nearest hospital staff member, a young woman who she'd worked with on occasion. The woman took one look at Udon. Her eyes widened, and then she ran off. It didn't take long for a stretcher to arrive. Sakura laid Udon on it and had the woman her as she rushed through the hospital. Having already memorized the layout, staff numbers, and which hospital rooms were currently occupied, Sakura was able to not only find a room, but also purloin aid in helping her stabilize Udon. "Sorry, I need you to take off Udon's shirt and clean his wound." "Yes, ma'am." The young woman who helped her was not a medical ninja like herself, but she was very skilled in medicine, and she wasn't squeamish. Whenever Sakura had to deal with a particularly brutal case, she would get this woman to help on the off chance that Shizune couldn't. As the woman set about doing what she had asked, Sakura rushed over to the cabinet. While medical ninjutsu worked wonders for healing, there was no jutsu to disinfect wounds. When out on the field, disinfecting wounds normally had to be disregarded due to a lack of supplies. However, in the hospital, there was no need to be so stingy. A strangled gurgle that came from behind her caused Sakura to turn around. Surprise shot through her like a lightning jutsu as her mind tried to comprehend what she was seeing. Sari stumbled forward, her hands on her throat, which gushed blood from a slash wound. The wound was clearly fatal, and she would bleed out in seconds. She sent Sakura a pleading look before she fell face first onto the floor. Sakura would have rushed to help her, but at that moment, Udon leapt from the table, a bloody kunai in hand, and lunged at her. Sakura reacted. Moving to the left, she avoided the initial lunge. She then reared her fist back and slammed it into Udon's spinal column. For good measure, she pumped her chakra into his spine, disrupting his ability to move. As he fell to the ground like a puppet without a puppeteer, Sakura rushed over to Sari. Kneeling down, she turned the woman onto her back. Sari had already bled a lot. Her sightless eyes were staring at the ceiling. However, she was still alive, and that meant that Sakura could save her. She went through a set of hand seals, activating her healing jutsu. As her hands glowed an ethereal green, Sakura placed them over Sari's throat. There was no time to clean and disinfect this wound. If she didn't do something now, then the woman was going to die. Sweat poured from her brow as she concentrated, focusing all of her effort into healing the damage. The kunai had bitten into more than just Sari's throat. It had slit a vein in her neck and cut through her esophagus. Blood welled up in Sari's lungs, but Sakura worked quickly to heal the damage before the woman could suffocate on her own ichor. Next she healed the damaged veins. By the time she was done, not only was she exhausted, but Sari had turned a ghostly pale from having lost so much blood. Blood packs, Sakura murmured to herself as she rushed over to the cabinet for some blood packs. Udon tried to get up again, but she slammed her fist into his back. The ground underneath him dented as he was smashed into it. Grabbing a blood pack and an IV drip, Sakura went over to Sari and attached the fourth to the blood pack, which she hung from a rack. After her task was finished, Sakura leaned back and wiped the sweat from her brow. There, she sighed, she should live. Now, to find out what's wrong with you, Dawn? Sakura stared at the person lying face first on the floor, a person who was most certainly not Udon. His skin was unnaturally white, not just pale or even albino, but a chalky white that went beyond mere skin disease or lack of pigmentation. What's more, he had a lot of mutations. Half of his face was missing merely lumpy flesh. He had spiky knobs protruding from his shoulders, and his left arm and leg was twisted and barely looked like limbs at all. Regardless of how this guy looked, it was clear that this person was not Udon. This person's chakra signature is the exact same as Udon's, though. Does that mean? Sakura felt realization strike her like a heavy fist to the gut. If this person's chakra signature was the same as Udon's, then it meant that he had somehow mimicked Udon's signature. And if this person could mimic Udon's chakra signatures, then it stood to reason that he, and maybe his allies if he had any, could mimic other people's chakra signatures as well. This was not good. If there were people running around who could change their appearance and mimic chakra signatures, it meant that Konoha had been invaded without them even knowing it. Who knew how many enemies were running around, disguised as people that she and the others knew, that they trusted? She could already picture the massacre that would happen if she didn't do something. I need to inform Tsunade-sama about this. After calling on several ninja and ordering them to take Udon to a secure location, Sakura rushed out of the hospital and towards the Hokage tower. She hoped that she could make it before they incurred any more casualties. Zux. After Sakura informed Tsunade about how someone had been impersonating Udon, chakra signature and all, an alert went out to all shinobi. Yet even with the knowledge that there were people impersonating Konoha shinobi, there was little anyone could do to defend themselves. The impersonators were virtually indistinguishable from the original. Their appearance was the same, their chakra was the same, there was nothing different to help others identify who was and wasn't being impersonated. Many shinobi were killed within the first few minutes after being alerted to what was happening. Chaos reigned as, all across Konoha, shinobi were stabbed in the back by people they trusted, or rather, by the ninja impersonating people they trusted. Matters only became worse when, without warning, multiple shinobi had white deformities grow on their bodies. The deformities soon turned out to be from spores, which drained people of their chakra. Many shinobi were killed by all of their chakra being drained. Help! What are these things? I feel so weak. Someone. Auba. a jonin of average ability, tried to help one of his comrades as spores grew on him. The frightened Chunin screamed as he tried to move to no avail. Whatever these things were, they not only drained a person of their chakra, but they also restricted their movement. Cutting it didn't work. Whatever this stuff was, it had hardened to the point where kunais simply glanced off it. Aoba. Sensei. The person he was trying to free gasped. Behind. You. Turning around, Aoba barely had a second to raise his kunai in defense, as a creature with white skin attacked him. Clang. His arms were jarred and as an arm bared down on him. Twisting out of the way, he moved into the white creature's guard and stabbed it in the chest. No blood came out, but the creature did rear back as it was injured. Not wanting it to escape, he went through a set of hand seals, ending on the tiger seal. Kaden, Gokyaku no Jutsu. A massive ball of fire flew from his mouth. It hit the creature, which howled in pain as it was burned alive. Flailing around, the creature eventually fell to the ground, writhing in tormented agony before it eventually ceased moving altogether. Aoba sighed and wiped the sweat from his forehead, feeling the way his arm shook from doing so. He didn't have much chakra, so B-rank jutsu like that exhausted him. Aoba-sensei. Look out. The warning came too late. Fire lanced through his back like a spear. He could feel his spine being severed, hear the sickening squelch, as his spinal column was sheared. The last thing he saw before dying was several white creatures converging on his comrade. Zux. Fu didn't know what was going on. When the alert went out, Shino had told her to remain within the Aburame clan compound. He'd said that it would be safer there. While she wanted to go out and help, she also knew that doing so when no one knew what they were facing was dangerous. For all they knew, the person attacking Konoha could have been Akatsuki. So, Fu had stayed at the Aburame compound. There were several other people with her, guards, whose job was to protect her. The three shinobi protecting her were Muta, Shikoro, and Tatsuma. She didn't know much about them. Aburame were all stoic individuals, so they didn't talk much, and the only one she'd held extensive conversations with was Shino. Still, she was grateful for their presence. Fu didn't want to admit it, but with everything that had happened and was happening, she was worried. If you keep pacing like that, you'll burn a hole in the carpet, Shikoro said softly. He was reading a book, probably one about bug raising, which he periodically flipped the pages of. Sorry, she apologized. There is no need to apologize. I am merely stating that I'm worried about you. I mean, thank you. The Aburame were a strange bunch. They were all so stoic, and they rarely ever spoke, and when they did speak, it was hard to tell if they were being serious or not. Fu didn't mind their generally emotionless attitudes. These people had taken her in. Still, it did make it hard to know what they were thinking. Sutan, Daibaka Sui Shoha. Neither Fu nor the Aburame clan members had a chance to do anything as several tons of water destroyed the wall and slammed into them. Fu screamed as she was swept up in a massive tide of rushing water. She was dragged underneath the water's surface. The world spun around her. Everything was passing by in a blur. She felt a sharp pain stab into her back, and she released a cry before she could stop herself. As all of the oxygen in her lungs was expelled, her body instinctively tried to breathe more oxygen in, which caused her to choke as water filled her lungs. She must have blacked out. The next thing Fu saw was a clear blue sky. She blinked several times, trying to figure out what had happened to her. Lying to her left, she saw Shikoro Aburame. His form was inert. Was he dead? Muta and Tatsuma were also there. They were lying not several feet away. They also weren't moving. A voice hummed. That wasn't as fun as I thought it would be. I was expecting them to put up more of a fight. Fu coughed several times, expelling water from her lungs. Nanabi's chakra helped her. She could feel it rolling within her, pushing the water out and evaporating what couldn't be pushed. With a gasp, her lungs were free, allowing her to take in several deep breaths. Move. Her eyes went wide as she rolled away from her current position not a moment too soon. Mere seconds after she moved, a large object crashed into the ground, shattering the earth. Fragments and rock shards flew everywhere. Fu scrambled to her feet, covering her body with her chakra-coated arms to protect her vitals. As the dust settled, Fu lowered her arms, and she was finally given her first look at the person who'd attacked her. He was a very tall shinobi. She couldn't see much of him, because he was covered in a black cloak with red clouds, but he towered over her like a colossal giant. His blue skin gleamed with a strange slickness in the light. Eyes like a shark stared at her with a predatory gleam. His clothing rustled as he grabbed the object, which she realized was a sword wrapped in bandages. He hefted the sword up with ease and set it on his shoulder. "So, you're the Namikaze who I'm here to take, eh? You don't look like much." Fu didn't know whether she should be insulted or not, but she knew that this person was trouble. Hiden, Rinpungaku no Jutsu. After going through a series of hand seals and taking a deep breath, Fu exhaled massive quantities of fine powder. The powder contained a luminous quality. So bright was the powder that Kisame screamed in surprise as he was blinded, which allowed Fu to act. She quickly pulled on Nanabi's chakra. An intense aura engulfed her, bubbling over her skin, which became completely covered in blackish red energy that took the shape of a bug. Mushiku. Fu charged at Kisame, who still appeared to be blinded. She was almost on her opponent when, without warning, Kisame stopped stumbling around like a blind man and slammed his sword into her face. Agony exploded as her nose broke with a loud crunch. With a shrill cry, Fu was sent flying backwards, pounding into the ground and rolling across it like a rag doll. Her transformation slipped as pain overrode her senses. Lying on her back, Fu struggled to sit up. "Hey, it's just like I thought. You might be a Jinchuriki, but you don't really know how to use all that power inside of you." Kisame grinned as he let his sword rest on his shoulder again. Fu glared at him, but he just chuckled. "And now it's time to eh? What the hell are these bugs doing here?" Kisame's advance was halted when dozens, maybe even hundreds, of bugs crawled up his legs and latched onto him. He flailed around, swearing and cursing as he tried to fight them. It proved useless, and there was soon a legion of tiny insects crawling all over his skin. "What the fuck? These things are eating my chakra. Where did these damn things come from?" Kisame's flailing soon grew weaker and weaker, until, finally, he collapsed onto the ground and remained still. Fu stared at the bug-covered lump, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. During this time, Shikoro, Muda, and Tatsuma all walked around from behind a line of trees. While their clothing was soaking wet, none of them appeared to have been injured. "Why, you're alive," Fu exclaimed in shock and relief. Shikoro adjusted his glasses. "Of course we alive. An attack of that level wouldn't kill us. Are you alright, Fu?" Yes, Fu said. "I'm a little unsteady, but I'll be okay." "I am glad to hear that. Now, let's leave. This place is no longer safe." "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," a voice said from behind them. Before anyone could do anything, the body that had been covered in bugs exploded, sending water flying everywhere. Seconds later, a voice rang out all around them. "Suten, Suikoda no Jutsu." A large shark burst into existence. Its watery skin revealed its origins as a powerful water jutsu. With a length that was several times longer than a human was tall and rows of sharp teeth, the creature looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Mudo and Tatsuma leapt out of the way, but Shikoro, who'd been helping Fu stand, didn't have the time. He shoved Fu away from him, thereby sealing his fate. Fu watched, horrified, as the gigantic jaws of the shark clamped down on the Aburame Shinobi. She could practically hear the sound of his bones being crushed over his screams of pain. Not long after that, the shark finished biting straight through him, sending the two halves violently careening away from each other. While Fu screamed at the sight, Mudo and Tatsuma attacked Kisame without hesitation. Bugs burst from their cloaks, whole swarms of them, which rushed to devour their shark-like foe. Kisame grinned. "Suten, Suida no Jutsu." The bugs stood no chance. As water shot from Kisame's mouth in a powerful torrent, the bugs were blasted away, and because they'd been doused with water, their wings had grown too heavy to keep them uplifted. All of them fell to the ground and remained there. "Not yet. Suten, Bakasui Shoha." After needing more chakra in his stomach, Kisame spat out a great volume of water, which surged and swelled like a massive tidal wave. The shark-like man rode atop the wave. He was grinning. Fu could do nothing as the water loomed over her. In the face of such an overwhelming technique, her mind had gone blank. She didn't know how to deal with this. She didn't know how to defeat a monster like this. Unlike her, Mudo and Tatsuma did not seem as hesitate. They responded quickly. Tatsuma grabbed Fu and lifted her over his shoulder. He and Mudo then leapt above the water as it crashed into the ground, engulfing everything in foamy white tides. "Suten, Gas Hokozame." Kisame placed his hands on the water, and from his fingers, 5 sharks emerged. As Mudo and Tatsuma landed on the water, the sharks burst from its surface and attacked. While Tatsuma moved out of the way, Mudo did not. He unleashed a swarm of bugs to attack the sharks, making them feast off the chakra that kept the shark's body together. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough bugs to catch all the sharks. One of them clamped onto his leg and pulled him under. No. Fu screamed as Tatsuma retreated with her still over his shoulder. Zux. Man, what the hell are these things? Kiba shouted as several white creatures tried to attack them. He leapt back, then drilled several with a Gatsuga, causing them to fly everywhere. Does it matter? Shino asked rhetorically as he spread his arms. A horde of bugs blasted out from his sleeves, engulfing several of the creatures and draining them of their chakra. The white monsters went down, twitching and spasming until they laid still. Don't answer my question with another question. Let's go, Akamaru. Arf. Just like the others, Teammate was fighting against uncertainty and the new white creatures, of which they knew nothing about. However, they were a bit better off than a lot of others. While Hinata's Byakugan could not distinguish chakra signatures, she could tell them what was happening in a 360-degree view around them, thereby warning them of possible approaching danger. Thanks to that, they'd been able to root out several enemy shinobi that had been disguised as Konoha shinobi. Gatsuga. Leaping into the air, Kiba and Akamaru spun around like a pair of drills. They slammed into the white horde, decimating their ranks, sending bodies flying left and right as they were torn apart. However, no matter how many enemies they destroyed, more filled the ranks. Man, how many of these guys are there? What are these things anyway? Demented clones? Hinata, who'd been using her Byakugan to the best of her abilities, shoved her left foot off the ground to spin around in a circle. Chakra emitted from her body at various points. The chakra eventually formed a dome of pure energy, which several members of the White Horde slammed into. The white creatures were flung away. Some of them struck walls while others simply tumbled down the road. Hinata stopped spinning, dust filling the air around them. I do not know, she answered, her breathing heavy. However, all of these people have the same chakra, so I think they might be clones. No two people can have the same chakra, Shino added as his bugs returned after consuming all the chakra of his enemies. Then why do some of these guys have the same chakra signatures as our shinobi? Kiba demanded to know. Were you not listening? Shina inquired rhetorically. These people are mimicking the chakra signatures of our shinobi. It is likely a talent unique to whoever these copies belongs to. Damn bastards. Kiba scowled. Don't think I'm gonna let you people get off lightly for this. You hear me? As Kiba launched himself into the mass swelling of enemies, Shino sighed. Idiot, he mumbled before backing up his comrade. Zux. Deep within Konoha's underground prison, Sasuke sat against the wall. His knees were drawn up to his chest. He ignored the darkness, the coldness, and everything else. With his revenge complete, Sasuke had nothing left. He was an empty shell without a purpose. Movement caught his attention. He looked up as a figure appeared within a black portal. It was a man with a strange spiral mask, and he wore the same cloak that Itachi had worn, black with red clouds. Sasuke Uchiha, he said, and Sasuke felt like he was being dissected as a single red eye stared at him through the mask hole. You're not at all what I expected. It is hard to believe that someone like you could have beaten Itachi. Sasuke said nothing. He didn't care what this person thought. The figure chuckled. Not much of a talker, I see. That is fine. I don't need you to talk, only listen. And the man began to talk. He spoke of Itachi and the third Hokage. He spoke of sacrifice. He spoke of things that made Sasuke pay attention. As Sasuke listened, rage boiled within his heart. What will you do, Sasuke Uchiha? The man who called himself Madara asked. Sasuke closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes gleamed with purpose and a desire for vengeance. On that day, Sasuke made a choice, one that would affect more than just him. Zux. While Konoha mounted a defense against the strange creatures, Konan went straight to the Hokage's office. She'd seen the enemy that the Konoha shinobi were battling. While she'd never realized that the two sides were capable of splitting apart, she knew who this person was even if he was missing half of himself. Hokage-sama, she said as she rushed into the door without ceremony. Several people were already in the room. Konan did not recognize all of them, but she knew at least three. Kakashi Hitake, Sakura Haruno, and Shizune also stood within the room. There appeared to be a meeting of some kind, which she had just barged into. Konan. Tsunade grunted as everyone stopped talking and turned to her. I'm sorry for sounding brusque, but if there's something you need, then please wait. We're in the middle of a crisis right now. I know. That's why I'm here. Knowing that time was of the essence, Konan walked into the room and got straight to the point. I know who's attacking you. He's a member of Akatsuki, a creature known as Zetsu. So, the white creature attacking us is called Zetsu, Kakashi said. While his Sharingan eye was covered, His visible eye was sharper than a rakieri. I thought he was supposed to be a man who looked almost like a plant. He is supposed to, but it seems like his white half and black half somehow became split. I did not know that was possible, but there is no mistaking that the creatures you've been fighting are Zetsus. Can you tell us anything about him? Asked Tsunade. I can tell you know what I know, but I don't know how much help it will be, Konan admitted. Zetsu is a strange creature. He should have a light and dark side physically speaking, I mean. One side of him is supposed to black while the other is white. I saw a few of those Zetsus on the way here. It looks like someone took Zetsu and ripped the black side off. He also seems to have several abilities that I was not aware of, and the Venus flytrap that Kakashi mentioned surrounding him is mysteriously missing. Tsunade's scowl deepened. Well, that's just great. So we're dealing with a mostly unknown entity. Do you have any information that could prove useful? Konan knew that Tsunade was not angry at her. She understood that. But the tone in the Hokage's voice, the harsh quality it possessed, still made her flinch. I can tell you that Zetsu has always worked with Tobi, one of Akatsuki's members. She frowned. Tobi is merely an alias, however. The one who goes by that name is actually Madara Uchiha. Her words sent everyone who'd been present into shock. A hushed silence fell over the crowd. It was like a ripple. Konan could practically feel the fear rolling off them. Madara is dead, Tsunade said with finality. He has to be. My grandfather killed him. Konan shook her head. I do not know what to tell you. I don't know if the first Hokage simply thought he'd killed Madara, or if the person calling himself Madara is an imposter. I only know what I've been told. Tobi calls himself Madara, and he is undeniably skilled. He also has the Sharingan. I can attest to that, Kakashi added. When we confronted him in the forest, I saw his Sharingan. Tsunade cut into the frightened whispering that broke out. Let us go under the assumption that he is Madara Uchiha. Do you think he is here? Hard to say, Konan admitted. He does not like to fight unless he has to. If anything, I would say that we should worry more about what Zetsu's goal is for attacking. His goal? Sakura asked. Zetsu has never been a fighter, Konan explained. His talent has always lay in spying. Even if he has strange abilities that I haven't seen until now, he's still weak. An attack of this level will not defeat Konoha, which means there is another reason for him to attack. Everyone fell silent. Konan also grew introspective as she tried to deduce the Zetsu's real purpose for being there. Truthfully, there didn't seem to be much reason for him to be there. Yes, he was currently sowing chaos, but now that everyone knew what to look out for, defeating him would be a simple enough matter. So, why would he do something like this, attack when there was no purpose, create panic when there was no reason, unless his reason is to cause a distraction? Hokage-sama. Where is Fu? Konan asked. Fu? Tsunade frowned. She should be on the Aburame clan grounds. Her eyes widened as she began barking orders. Kakashi. Sakura. Head over to the Aburame clan grounds and locate Fu. Yes, Tsunade-sama. The two said at once. I'll go with you too, Konan said, only for Tsunade to disagree. Actually, I would like you here. I need you to help coordinate our defenses, since you know the members of Akatsuki the best. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, there is little that I can do to help. Zetsu has apparently been hiding several abilities of which I know nothing about. However, even if my knowledge of Zetsu is no longer reliable, my knowledge of whoever is working while Zetsu distracts us will be. There was truthfully only one person who could have been attacking at this point. Kisame. Everybody else was dead, having been killed by Naruto. Tsunade debated with herself for a moment, then sighed reluctantly and nodded. Very well. Go and help Kakashi and Sakura. If the person going after Fu is who I think it is, they will need help anyway. I'm at your disposal, Hokage-sama. Good. Tsunade clapped her hands. Alright, people. Let's do this. Zux. Fu and Tatsuma stopped running after they reached a thickly forested area. Trees covered almost every square meter, and shrubs ran along underfoot. They were likely in one of the outlier training grounds that surrounded Konoha's circumference. Sinking to the ground, Fu felt her entire body shaking in exhaustion, fear, and guilt. I'm sorry, she whispered. Tatsuma, who'd been standing near a tree and releasing a steady stream of bugs, turned to her. Sorry for what? For what happened? Muto and Shikoro died because of me. Bringing her legs up to her chest, Fu wrapped her arms around them and tried to ignore the way her body shook. This is all my fault. If I had never come to Konoha, this wouldn't have happened. Tatsuma's glasses glinted in the low light that broke through the canopy. He tilted his head, as if considering her words, then he turned back to the tree and continued releasing bugs. "We Abrame run on logic," he said after a time. "An Abrame will never act on their emotions. The hive mind of our insects do not allow us. Perhaps, more than any other shinobi in Konoha, we understand what it means to be a small part of a greater whole. And just like we understand that, we also understand that things happen in war, things we don't expect, things we don't want. People die. Loved ones are lost. As an Abrame, we know this, and we accept this, which is why I can honestly tell you that what happened here is not your fault." Fu looked up in shock. "But, if I had never come to Konoha, then Konoha would have eventually been attacked anyway," Tatsuma said. "If not because of Naruto Namikaze, then because we would have opposed the people calling themselves Akatsuki anyway. This was bound to happen sooner or later. It was just bad fortune that it happened while you were here." Fu didn't know if Tatsuma was trying to make her feel better, or if those were his real thoughts. Because his face was completely covered, and what parts of his face could be seen revealed nothing, she never knew what he was thinking. However, she was grateful for his words. "Aw, ain't this a touching moment?" a mocking voice rang out around them. Fu stiffened while Tatsuma directed his bugs toward an area near their position. The bugs swarmed over there, but they were destroyed by several large water bullets slamming into them. A large object, a sword, suddenly shot out from behind a large bush. Left with little time to prepare, all Tatsuma could do was create a wall of bugs. It did little good. The sword smashed apart the bugs and slammed into Tatsuma, who cried out in agony as the bandages tore and spikes suddenly jutted from the weapon. As blood ran down his body, the sword seemed to pour. Giggy. Tatsuma tried to pull the sword off, but the moment he touched the handle, spikes erupted from it, impaling his hands. Tatsuma screamed as the protrusions went through his palms and out of the back of his hands. The purring also grew louder, then, without warning, the sword wrapped around Tatsuma, and a large mouth appeared at its point. Fu could do nothing but sit there, terrified as the sword chomped down on Tatsuma's head, then slowly ate the rest of his body. She quaked as blood splattered the ground. Her breathing became so harsh she might have been hyperventilating. The sword, engorged from having eaten somebody, purred in a satisfactory manner and released what sounded like a burp. Chuckling, Kisame knelt down and lifted his sword by the handle. "How was that Samata? Was it good eating?" Giggy. "Good. I'm glad you're satisfied." Standing up to his full, intimidating height, Kisame grinned at Fu. "I guess it's now time to deal with the squirt. I think I should chop her legs off so she can't run away anymore." Before Kisame could get any closer to Fu, several hundred shuriken made of paper sliced through the thick foliage. Kisame brought up Samata, blocking his vitals with the large sword. Several shuriken still penetrated his flesh, hitting his thighs, arms, and stomach. Blood ran from the wounds, but Kisame seemed unbothered. "Well, now," Kisame started with a grin as several people landed in the clearing. "I never expected to see you again. Konan." Standing protectively before Fu was Konan, Kakashi, and Sakura. Zux. Naruto wiped the sweat from his brow as he looked at the afternoon sun. It was midday. The sun overhead was bearing down on him and the others as they worked. All around him, Konoha and Yuki Ninja searched for survivors. They hadn't found many, which was expected considering the amount of damage that had been done to this place, but they had found a few survivors. "Naruto." Yugita's voice alerted him to her presence. They'd split up a while ago to cover more ground. While Naruto was worried about her, Koyuki was staying by the woman's side in case she had a relapse. Turning to her, Naruto saw that she looked surprisingly happy for some reason. There couldn't have been many reasons, and he quickly deduced that they'd found another survivor. Running alongside her, trying to keep pace with the more athletic woman, was Koyuki. The queen looked close to collapse. On any other occasion, Naruto would have chuckled. "Yugito," he said as the woman in question rushed up and grabbed him by the arm. "Naruto. We found a survivor. It's Samui." Remembering the young woman with the abnormally large bust, Naruto allowed Yugito to pull him along with her. They traveled over debris, walked around massive structures that had collapsed, and raced over once towering pillars that had been destroyed by the Rinnegan's power, eventually reaching an outlying section of the village. There wasn't as much destruction this far out. The Rinnegan attack that destroyed Kumo had been localized to a single point. However, there were several buildings that had been decimated, gutted, and ruined. Among the pile of debris, Yugi dragged him to where Samui was being helped by several medical ninja. Her skin was marred with cuts and bruises, and Naruto could see blood leaking from her mouth, leading him to believe that she had internal bleeding. As the medical ninja cut off her shirt and checked for broken bones or ruptured organs, Naruto noticed the slow rise and fall of her chest. "Samui," Yugi said as she knelt beside the woman. The medical ninja ignored her presence and continued working. "Samui, it's me. It's Yugi." Samui didn't respond. Naruto looked at Koyuki, who noticed him and turned her head, gracing him with a sad smile. Naruto wrapped an arm around Yugi, pulling her close for comfort. She didn't resist him. Her body shuddered against his, causing him to lean forward and kiss her forehead. "Don't worry, Yugi. Samui will be fine once she gets medical attention." "I know." Yugi turned in his arm and buried her head in his face. "Thank you." Naruto didn't know why she was thanking him. He'd done nothing to be thanked for. "You're welcome," he said anyway. Sometimes, simply being there was enough to earn someone's thanks. Zux. Suten, Suikoda no Jutsu. Suten, Suikoda no Jutsu. Two large sharks burst into existence, their identically watery forms clashing together and blasting liquid everywhere in a misty spray. Konan, who stood several feet as Kakashi and Kisame clashed, casually blinked at the incredible display of prowess that the copy ninja was wielding. "I know of the Sharingan from Itachi, but this is my first time seeing it being used up close. It truly is a fearsome dojutsu." "Hey, you wield the Sharingan well for someone who isn't an Uchiha," Kisame complimented as he grabbed Saimata by the hilt and swung it forward. "Thank you." Kakashi leapt backwards, avoiding the attack. He threw several shuriken, which went wide of Kisame, who kept rushing in until Kakashi yanked on the wires in his hands and entangled the missing Kiri ninja. Coming from someone who was partnered with Itachi, that is a high compliment. Chidori. Lightning traveled along the wires, sparking and crackling. Kisame grunted, his muscles straining as he broke free of the wires and leapt back. Grinning widely, he placed Saimata on his back and went through even more hand seals. Suten, Daikodan no Jutsu. Streamers of water gathered swiftly and formed a massive shark that was nearly 10 times bigger than his previous one. Thrusting his hands forward, Kisame sent the shark at Kakashi, who'd already completed his own hand seals and flawlessly performed the same jutsu, thereby negating the attack. Seeing her chance, Konan launched several paper shuriken at Kisame, who saw them coming and dispatched them with Saimata. However, those shuriken were not normal, and the moment they met his sword, all of them exploded in a spectacular manner. Kisame burst out of the explosion, his skin blackened but not truly burned. He was wearing a maniacal grin as he raced toward her. "I had almost forgotten about you, Konan." He tried to slash her apart with Saimata, but Konan had already taken to the sky. Wings made of paper carried her forward. The wind whistled in her ear and rustled her hair. Before traveling too high, she threw several paper bombs at Kisame, who leapt back as they exploded, blasting apart the ground. Reikiri. The sound of loud chirping preceded Kakashi's appearance. Lightning covered his hand as he darted forward, stepping Kisame's guard and plunging his lightning-coated fist into the shark man's chest only for Kisame to burst into water, and for that water to entrap Kakashi within a dome. Kakashi then burst into smoke and a log took his place, revealing that he'd used the replacement technique, Karawimi. "Hee, this is pretty fun," Kisame said as he and Kakashi reappeared several meters away from each other. He went through a string of hand seals. "Let's make this even more fun." Suten, Daibaka Suishoha. Water spewed from Kisame's mouth in vast quantities. The water rose over everything, crushing waves looming over the forest of Konoha like towering mountains. Konan knew of this technique, and she knew that Kakashi wouldn't be able to escape from something with this sort of area-wide effect. Swooping down, she flew right at Kakashi and grabbed him just as the waves threatened to crush him. Whoom! The waves slammed into the ground. Several trees were crushed underneath the water, splintering into thousands of pieces before being swept away by the tide. "Thanks for the assist," Kakashi said. "You're welcome." Down below, Kisame, who was now standing on the crushing waves, wove more hand seals. Knowing that whatever he had planned couldn't be good, Konan rushed to ascend even higher. If she could just move out of the range of his techniques. Surosumi Odori no Jutsu. Oh, no. Konan felt panic as a dome of water engulfed her and Kakashi. The massive dome expanded quickly. She felt herself becoming trapped within the dome. Not only could she no longer breathe, but because her wings were made of paper, they quickly became soggy and broke apart, What do I do now? This was not a good situation. All of her jutsu were paper-based, but paper was useless unless prepared in advance like the technique that had gotten Madara. This technique, which was controlled by Kisame, made her helpless. Kakashi tapped on her shoulder, garnering her attention and pointing at something. Konan looked at where he'd pointed and felt her worry increase. Kisame was rushing toward them, and his appearance was very different from what she remembered. His blue skin had picked up a grayish pallor. Large fins covered the back of his arms, and his hands were webbed and clawed. Gills ran along his trapezius. His head was no longer shaped like a human's, but was long and sleek, almost like a real shark. A long tail jutted from his tailbone. Saimata was nowhere to be found. He's fused with Saimata. This isn't good. He has us at a complete disadvantage. Kisame closed the distance. She and Kakashi swam out of the way, but his tail slammed into Kakashi, who he must have deemed was a larger threat. Fortunately, Kakashi still seemed capable of using jutsu. He replaced himself with another log. Staring at her current companion, she pointed at Kakashi, then at the other side of the water prison. Kakashi must have understood what she wanted. He nodded, and they split up and traveled in opposite directions. After a moment's hesitation, Kisame chased after Kakashi. The water prison technique that Kisame was using had one glaring weakness. Once the technique had been activated, it altered its position in order to reflect the direction of its user's movements, in this case, Kisame. While this was great for one-on-one battles, it was not so great when there were two or more opponents. Kisame could only follow one person, which meant that if she and Kakashi split up, it would be easier for one of them to escape. After that, they could break the technique from the outside. Konan's lungs burned as she swam towards the edge of the technique. She'd already been inside of that water prison for what must have been 60 seconds, and she was running out of oxygen. Her vision was becoming blurry, her arms felt like they were weighed down by lead, and her legs were growing tired. Just a little bit further. With a startled gasp, Konan burst out of the water prison. She landed on the ground, bending her knees absorbed the impact. Stand up, she turned around to see the water dome. It truly was a massive thing. She didn't know how large it was, but judging from her observation, she'd say that it was around 1 kilometer in circumference at least. How do I destroy a technique like that? Konan-san. Sakura called out to her. Konan turned around to see the pink-haired girl leaping down from a tree. Sakura. Where is Fu? She's with Tsunade-sama and Shizune-san, Sakura said, huffing. What is that technique? And where is Kakashi? Kakashi-san is currently fighting Kisame inside of that technique. Konan turned back to the dome of water. We need to find some way to destroy this dome, however, I lack the power necessary for such an endeavor. She might have been able to destroy the technique if she used a bunch of paper bombs, but there was no guarantee that would work. While bombs created incredible force, especially when used in conjunction with several hundred other bombs, the water was being held together by Kisame's chakra. What's more, setting up enough paper bombs to demolish the technique would take time. They didn't have that much time. So, you need to destroy that water prison somehow, Sakura murmured, her expression thoughtful. Do you think you can fly me over the dome? Konan didn't know if she could. Would her paper work, or was it too wet? Turning her head, she channeled her chakra and formed a pair of paper wings on her back. Flapping them experimentally produced decent results. Her wings were wet, but they appeared to be in working order. I should be able to, she announced, grabbing hold of Sakura and taking off into the air. Her wings felt heavy, and Sakura's added weight didn't help any. Konan channeled more chakra into her wings, hardening them further, allowing her to ascend higher. It wasn't long before they were hovering over the large dome of water. Konan could see Kakashi battling with Kisame. Thus far, the copy ninja managed to remain alive via judicial use of his Sharingan, but he had to be running out of breath. She could see that his movements were getting sluggish. What do I do now? Konan asked Sakura. Drop me. What? I said drop me. Let go and I'll take care of the rest. Konan didn't know what Sakura had in mind. She must have been crazy for thinking up a plan like this. However, it wasn't like they had any other plans. Konan let go of Sakura, who plummeted toward the sphere of water like a rock. The pink-haired girl reared back her fist. Was she actually planning on punching this thing? Shanaro. She was, apparently. Konan could only blink as Sakura yelled out a strange battle cry and slammed her fist into the dome of water. She expected the young woman to simply sink into the water. What happened next shocked her. Starting from the point of impact and spreading across the entire prison was a large ripple. The dome soon began to undulate. Then, without warning, the entire thing exploded. Water flew everywhere. Konan closed her eyes as she was struck in the face with enough water to drown a dragon. Her wings, thoroughly soaked, were unable to remain cohesive and broke apart. As she fell, she channeled chakra to her legs and feet, softening the fall so that she didn't break her legs. Looking around, she saw Sakura standing on the ground, her fist still extended in the punch position. Kisame and Kakashi were also there. The Akatsuki ninja looked utterly flabbergasted to see his technique destroyed, and his shark-like face had morphed into an expression of astonishment. On the other hand, Kakashi looked quite proud. "That was a good punch, Sakura," he complimented. "Thank you, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura said with a tired sigh. She destroyed one of Kisame's most powerful techniques with a single punch, Konan thought in shock. Truly, the younger generation of shinobi were quite fearsome. "Hey! I didn't expect that," Kisame muttered. "You were pretty strong, little missy. I didn't think you were packing that much power. I've been trained by Tsunade-sama herself." Sakura wheezed. "She must have used up most of her chakra. Don't underestimate me." Duly noted. Konan, Kakashi, and Sakura surrounded Kisame, who didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, he wore a rather wide grin, which made his current shark-like appearance all the more frightening. Despite this, Konan was confident that they could beat him. His best technique had just been destroyed, and it was now 3 against 1. Even for someone with Kisame's monstrous reserves, this would be a hard-fought battle. "Kisame," a voice said as a black creature appeared out of the ground. "Zetsu?" Konan was startled to see Zetsu without his white half, but if the white half had, indeed, split as it appeared, then it made sense that the black half was on its own too. "What do you want, Zetsu? Can't you see I'm busy?" "I can see that, however, there's no more need to fight anymore. We've already accomplished our objective." "DCH, so we're leaving already, are we?" Kisame looked annoyed but resigned. "Well, fine. I've had a good deal of fun, so I guess we can head out." "You say that like we're just going to let you leave," Kakashi said. However, it wasn't the Kakashi in front of Kisame, but the one directly behind him. "Reikiri." Kakashi plunged his lightning-covered hand into Kisame's back, but rather than blood coming out of the wound, it was water. The Kisame that he'd killed dispersed into a puddle, which Konan deduced came from the remains of the water prison. "Don't worry, Copy Ninja. We'll finish this battle later," Kisame's voice echoed all around them. "I hope you're looking forward to it as much as I am." Silence reigned in the clearing for a moment. Then Kakashi sighed, breaking the silence as he placed his headband back over his Sharingan eye. "It looks like this battle ended in a draw," he said. Konan got the feeling that Kakashi had been hoping to eliminate Kisame, not that she couldn't understand why. "What should we do now?" asked Sakura. "We'll go back to Konoha and help them drive off the white Zetsus." They began to move. Because Kakashi had used up a lot of chakra, they didn't travel as quickly as they could have. The drain on his reserves must have been phenomenal. "The white Zetsus have probably all retreated by now," Konan said. Zetsu told Kisame that they had completed their objective. "I wonder what he meant by that?" Sakura asked. Neither Konan nor Kakashi answered her. They wanted to know the same thing. Zux. When Konan, Kakashi, and Sakura returned from battling Kisame, it was to discover that the battle had already reached its conclusion. What was going on now was simply clean up. The battle hadn't caused much collateral damage. Most of the buildings were still completely intact, some were even pristine. What the Konoha shinobi needed to do was not help with repairs, but locate the dead bodies of the ninja and civilians who'd been impersonated by the white Zetsus. Unfortunately, there were a lot of them. Konan stood in the Hokage's office with Tsunade and several others. She'd decided to lend aid by offering the Hokage whatever expertise she could. It wasn't much. Zetsu apparently had more powers and abilities than either she or Nagato had been aware of, which meant that Akatsuki was even more divided than she had assumed. It was becoming clear to her now that she and Nagato had merely been tools for Madara. Though she didn't know what his ultimate purpose was, she understood that it likely wasn't the goal that Nagato was aiming for. This situation has become even harder to grasp. Several people came into the office, ninja who'd been helping with the cleanup. Konan didn't recognize them, but that wasn't surprising. "Status," Tsunade said while keeping her fingers laced in front of her, as if to try and shield herself from more bad news. We've located the bodies of more than 2,000 civilians and 1,500 shinobi, though the numbers appear to be rising. Considering there were a total of 5,000 civilians who went missing, chances are good that we're going to have more than 8,000 casualties. I see. Konan wondered if the pain look that Tsunade wore was being mirrored on her own face. What happened was horrible, and there was very little they could do to recover right now, especially after the Kumagakure incident. She wondered, almost absently, if this disaster would have happened if Naruto had been present. I don't think there was much that even he could have done. Naruto was an excellent fighter, but he didn't have any sensor capabilities. Although his Sage Mode might have been able to distinguish chakra signatures, but not having any sensing abilities of her own, she wasn't sure if even that would have worked. Please keep me informed of how the search is going, Tsunade said after several long moments of silence. Yes, Hokage-sama. As the man left the room, Tsunade slammed her fist on the table. Damn it! That Akatsuki really played us for fools this time. Konan felt guilt hit her like an earth jutsu to the gut. She had once been a member of Akatsuki. I'm sorry, she apologized. Tsunade grunted as she went about arranging her desk. It's not your fault. This kind of situation would have surprised anyone, she said, though Konan felt like Tsunade was, indeed, blaming her for what happened. It might have just been her own guilty conscience playing tricks on her, but she could have sworn that Tsunade's voice was incriminating her, as if to say, it really is your fault. You should have been more proactive. If there is anything that I can do to help, don't worry. I'll be sure to let you know. Right now, though, all we're doing is counting the number of casualties. Konan said nothing. Fingering the kunai in her pocket, she wished more than ever that Naruto had never left for that mission to Kumo. Even if what happened here was inevitable, she would have felt better if he'd been with her. Hokage-sama. A Konoha ninja rushed through the door, gasping for breath. He looked like he'd run across the entirety of Konoha to get here. What's the problem now? Tsunade asked with a scowl. It's Sasuke Uchiha, ma'am, the shinobi gasped. He's missing from his cell. Zucks. Altogether, they had found 2,365 survivors. Considering Kumagakure had once boasted a population of about 100,000, 2,365 wasn't that large. But when Naruto took the amount of destruction into consideration, they were probably lucky to find even that many. Kumo hadn't just been destroyed. It had been annihilated. The very mountain range that it had been built on was gone. The fact that there were any survivors at all was a miracle. They'd been forced to dig deep underneath the mountain range's rubble to locate anyone. Naruto had made liberal use of his shadow clones to help in this task. While some survivors had been near the surface and easily found, there were just as many who'd been buried underneath tons of rocks and dirt. The mountain had collapsed in such a way that it had created pockets of space where the people hadn't been crushed. Under his direction, Konoha had built a temporary base station just outside of the village. They'd built several tents for the citizens to sleep in. There were also medical tents for the medical ninja, who'd been working all day tending to the injured. Naruto felt almost out of place. He wanted to do more for the people here, but there wasn't anything else that he could do. He was no medical ninja. Just about the only thing he was good for during times like these was manual labor. Walking among the tents, Naruto continued moving to the back, until he reached a specific tent. He pushed the flap aside and entered. Like all of the tents, this one was bare. It contained only a small cot resting on one side of the room. There were 3 people inside already, Yugito, Koyuki, and Samui. Of the 3, only 2 were conscious. How's Samui doing? Naruto asked as he walked up to them. She's still unconscious, Yugito said softly, not looking up from the other blonde. Naruto realized that she was running her hands through Samui's hair. Though I've been told that she'll wake up soon. That's good. Naruto looked at Koyuki, who caught his eye and shook her head. He sighed, walked up to Yugito, and placed a hand on her shoulder. Are you feeling guilty for what happened here? Yugito didn't answer at first, and he didn't rush her. He let her take time to formulate an answer, knowing that her feelings right now must have been contradictory and mixed with self-loathing. I know, in my head, that I couldn't have done anything even if I had been here, she said at last. I understand that, but at the same time, your heart is telling you that you should have been here and done something, Naruto finished when Yugito trailed off. She didn't say anything, but her silence was more telling than any words she could have said. Sitting down next to her, he placed a hand over her free hand. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything that he could say to make her feel better. He could have told her that it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have done anything, but that wouldn't have changed how she felt. Yugito knew that she wasn't responsible. However, sometimes, just because someone knew that in their head, that didn't mean the guilt, the feeling of being responsible, would go away. NNNGGG. A groan caused all three of them to turn their heads. Samui stirred. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open, revealing cloudy blue irises. She blinked several more times. The woman looked around, her head tilting slightly, as if she was scanning her surroundings, before they landed on Yugito. Yugito. Samui, Yugito whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Tears stung her eyes. I'm so glad. You're alright. I was. When I found out what happened to Kumo, Kumo? Samui whispered. What happened to Kumo? Yugito opened her mouth, then closed it just as quickly. She tried again, only to get the same results. Samui, fortunately, seemed to realize what she was trying to say. I should have known this would happen. The wreckage. Is he still alive? Yugito said nothing. I see. Samui closed her eyes for a moment, her face etched into an expression that made Naruto uncomfortable. It felt like he was getting a glimpse of something that she shouldn't have seen. Naruto could sense that Samui was on the verge of losing it. Yugito also appeared to be withholding her tears. He looked over at Koyuki, silently seeking her advice. She tilted her head toward the door, then gestured to themselves. Naruto took the hint. Yugito, he said, leaning over to speak softly into her ear. Yuki and I are going outside to check on how the other survivors are doing. Are you two gonna be okay alone? Yugito turned her head. She gave him a watery smile before leaning over to kiss him on the cheek. We'll be fine. Thank you. Gracing her with one last smile that he hoped was reassuring, Naruto took Koyuki by the hand and led her outside. Several seconds after the flap closed behind him, the sound of despairing twin wails echoed from the other side. He placed a silencing seal over the tent. Whatever happened in there was no one's business but Yugito's and Samui's. Neither of them spoke for a long while. They walked through the series of tents, watching as Konoha and Yuki Ninja traversed the small area doing whatever they could to lighten the Kumo survivors' load. Several saluted or bowed to them as they passed. A line of people could be seen several meters away, the refugees of Kumo that were conscious. Even though they were carrying plates of food, courtesy of Koyuki's chefs, their expressions remained despondent. What are we going to do about all of these displaced people? Koyuki asked Naruto. He was grateful for the chance to speak. I'm not sure yet, Naruto admitted. We certainly can't do nothing, which means we'll need to see if there are any nations willing to take them in. I wouldn't mind letting them come to Konoha, but I'll need to clear that with the Hokage, especially since there are so many people. If it was just 1, 2, or even 100, there wouldn't have been a problem with relocating them to Konoha. However, with 2,365 survivors, that was too many to consider relocating without deciding on other factors that would come with such a large population increase. There would, first and foremost, be the issue of housing. With so many refugees, they'd need to find a place for all of them to stay. This was on top of things like provisions and several other issues, not the least of which was having all of them undergo a psychoanalysis to see anyone might be suffering from PTSD or other mental illnesses due to trauma and stress. There was a lot more to consider than simply should we or shouldn't we. The land of snow will be able to take some of the refugees, Koyuki said. Now that we have the heat generators, we're not short on supplies. We've recently even advanced in the study of agriculture and have a surplus of food, particularly rice. I'll talk it over with my advisors to see how many we can take without putting a strain on our resources. And I'll see about asking Tsunade-sama if we can allow rest to take up President's Konoha, Naruto said. They stopped several meters outside of the encampment. He turned to Koyuki and slid his arms around her waist, pulling her close. In return, she placed her arms around his neck. Holding her like this, Naruto enjoyed the way she felt in his arms. His only regret was that she was wearing so many clothes that he couldn't feel the lithe curvature of her waist. Thank you for doing this, he said, presenting her with a soft smile. Koyuki shook her head. You know that I'm more than happy to help. What happened here is a tragedy, but it would be even more tragic if those of us in positions to help did nothing. Spoken like a true daimyo. Naruto leaned in while Koyuki tilted her head up and stood on her toes. Slowly closing his eyes, the last thing that Naruto saw was Koyuki doing the same. Naruto Teiko. A voice rang out, causing him and Koyuki to jerk away from each other as if they'd been standing next to a paper bomb. "What is it, Izumo?" Naruto asked, hiding his scowl. "We've just received a letter from Konoha. It's addressed to you," Izumo said, holding out a letter. Frowning, Naruto took the letter and undid the clasp, holding it closed. Reading the contents, he felt a sudden sense of exhaustion well up inside of him. "What's wrong?" Koyuki asked. In response, he handed the scroll off to Koyuki. It was technically a breach in protocol to reveal something that was meant for his eyes only, but since everyone would know about it soon, he didn't see the problem. Koyuki read the scroll and gasped. "It seems Konoha had some problems while we were away." Naruto wore a mirthless smile. Zucks. They had gathered. Pain looked down at the people who'd come at his behest. He saw the headbands of numerous shinobi villages, Takigakuer, Getsugakuer, Hoshigakuer, Ishigakuer, Shimogakuer, and many others. All of them were looking up at him, waiting for him to inform them of why he'd asked for this meeting. He stood on the balcony of his headquarters in Amigakuer. The rain didn't pour that day. He had stopped it for this meeting, though that did not mean that he wasn't keeping an eye out. His eyes saw more than anyone present could have expected. Since the founding of the hidden villages, 5 villages in particular have stood at the top, Pain started. Konoha, Kumo, Kiri, Iwa, and Suna. These 5 villages, which have been known as the 5 greatest hidden villages, have not only stood at the top, but they have trampled the smaller villages, like yours, underfoot. Pain paused, listening to the way the shinobi down below him muttered. They were discontent. That was good. For decades now, the minor hidden villages have been trampled on by wars waged by the 5 great nations. We've suffered more casualties than anyone else, not because we took part in their wars, but because we were in the way. Our people have been butchered, caught in the crossfire between the uncaring shinobi villages who speak of peace but wage war. The discontent mutterings grew. He could see it on their faces, the anger at their situation, their rage at the 5 great nations. He would turn that rage into a bonfire of hatred, and then he would forge that hatred into a sword, which he would wield at the 5 great nations. However, the time of the 5 great nations is coming to an end. Less than a week ago, I destroyed Kumagakur no Sato. His proclamation was not met with silence, but with more whispering. No doubt they knew this already. If one man can destroy a single hidden village, then what could an army do? If one person can defeat one of the most powerful nations ever, then what could we do if all of the minor villages band together? He could see the way they responded to his words. Some were nodding, others appeared contemplative, still not on board but willing to listen. That was fine. By the end of this night, every one of these people would join him, or they would die. Zucks. Shibuki never could have imagined that something like this would happen. Unlike the others, who'd been swept up in the euphoria that Pain's wordshot had caused, he was calm enough to understand that this man only spoke half-truths. It was true that the 5 great nations often waged war. It was also true that the minor nations and villages were sometimes caught up in these wars. However, just as there were 2 sides to every coin, so, too, was there another side to this story. While the great nations waged war, they also helped the smaller villages, even going so far as to risk themselves for the safety of those they were allied with. Takigakure's alliance with Konoha was a prime example of this. Despite having once sent an assassin after their first Hokage, Konoha had helped his village many times in the past, especially recently. Of course, the others weren't interested in hearing this truth. They only cared about what this meant for them. Prestige. Power. Many smaller nations wanted the power that the 5 great nations wielded. When Pain ended his speech, asking those gathered to join him in his righteous crusade to crush the 5 great nations, a raucous cheer went up from everybody present, everybody except Shibuki. I need to warn Konoha about this. After Pain's speech, Shibuki traveled to his hotel, which was where all of the foreign shinobi were staying. He'd ignored them as they spoke in tones of hushed excitement. All of these people were fools. A person like Pain clearly didn't care about the other nations. Whatever his plans were, whatever his goal was, it was clear to Shibuki that he was only using minor nations for his own purposes. Entering his room, Shibuki quickly packed all of his belongings. The 2 ninja that he'd brought with him stood vigilantly by his side. "Are we leaving so soon?" Yoro asked. He was a tall man, and one of his village's stronger jonin. Shibuki also trusted him with his life. Would it not draw suspicion for us to leave early like this? It might, Shibuki admitted. But if we don't leave now and inform Konoha about what's happening, then we may never get another chance. Should we really inform Konoha about this, though? Asked the other Jonin that he'd brought. Wouldn't it be better if we didn't inform them? Shibuki paused. Slowly, he turned to Kagen, whose face remained impressively blank. He didn't get angry, but considered Kagen's words for what they were. What do you think would happen if we went to war with the 5 great nations? You mean the 4 great nations, Kagen pointed out. Kumagakure has been destroyed. Our spies have confirmed that. Very well. What would happen if we went to war against the remaining 4 nations? Kagen took several moments to consider the question. I imagine that many of us would end up being destroyed in the fight. Also, it would be even worse for us, because our Jinchuriki is under the protective custody of Konoha, who currently has powerful shinobi such as Tsunade Senju and Naruto Namikaze. That's right. Our position is untenable. Even if I agreed with Pain, which I don't, our village would suffer greatly. Besides, this man calling himself Pain is a member of Akatsuki. Not only did Akatsuki attack our village to try and abduct Fu, but they had also recruited Kakazu, the most reviled missing ninja from our village. Kagen and Yora stiffened at the name. Kakazu was one of their village's greatest failings, a shinobi who'd held much promised but was exiled after failing to kill the first Hokage. Many people of their village hated Kakazu for his failure, but Shibuki knew that it was their own failing which had resulted in Kakazu's betrayal. Neither of his Jonin argued with him after that. After he'd packed everything, Shibuki and his 2 Jonin waited until nightfall to leave. They slipped out under the cover of darkness and slowly made their way through Amigakure. Large structures of steel towered over them on all sides, which did little to block out the rain that now poured down on them. The dull gleam of cold steel combined with the gloomy sky gave Shibuki a bad feeling, but he ignored it and pressed on. As they reached the halfway point, Shibuki's danger sense, which had been prickling at the back of his mind, suddenly went haywire. He, Kagen, and Yoro leapt back when something crashed into the ground before them. A pained grunt caused him to snap his head toward Yoro. His eyes widened when he saw his shinobi being impaled by a metal rod from behind. Not only that, but Kagen was lying on the ground, motionless, and had someone standing over him, holding something wispy and ethereal in their hand. The 2 figures both had the same Rinnegan eyes that Pain did. Damn it! Who are these 2? Shibuki began making hand seals for one of his signature jutsu. Unfortunately, he would never get to cast his technique. The last thing he heard were the words Banshu Tenin. The last thing he saw was the wall rushing to meet his face. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.